What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, August 29th, 2019. It is my 67th birthday here. I have the same birthday as former Senator John McCain and Michael Jackson, the entertainer, which I think kind of blows that whole astrology theory out of the water because I can't dance. I'm not into little boys, and I'm not corrupt. So, of course, I'm doing all the things today that I shouldn't be doing to celebrate my birthday. I'm smoking, I'm drinking. I tore all the tags off the cushions here in this hotel room. And so, yeah, after the radio show is over, Claire and I have got a few errands to do. And, basically get into kind of fun mode because we have tonight, tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday morning we leave for Indiana. So these are the last few nights that we're going to be here on the island of Oahu. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with that. Meanwhile, we have a bit of a guest who's joining us, and it's David from Crucial Nonsense. And David is the guy who's put together this rather splendiferous system that has allowed us to communicate remotely using a laptop. We also use it on the main desktop machine, and it works so much better than many other solutions that we've seen. So, David, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Aloha to you, Michael. I'm glad to be here. I hope this is working. You hear me, right?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I'm not hearing myself, so that kind of makes sense, actually, because I got about 5 audio feeds in here. Yeah, I'm glad this is working. This has been kind of an interesting project, being able to replace the Skype and the Twitch with a more sovereign platform, and I'm tickled to be able to do it. And happy birthday to you, and I'm glad to be able to at least supply something back. You've done a lot of work for us over the last decade. I encountered you when you first started doing radio with Alex Jones back a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, it was. And I was like, I like what this guy's got to say. He makes sense. He's been real common sense, real down to the brass tacks of it, not wasting a bunch of time. I'm like, yeah, heck yeah. And when the division, happened between you and Alex, it was a very easy choice to just stick with what really happened. Say, well, Alex, it's been fun. It's been nice. And we've been with what really happened ever since, following you from network to network to network. And here we are back on RBN, and looking forward to be able to rebuild your studio and do some fantastic things into the future. It certainly impacted a lot of people. There's very few people that I run into in the quote Patriot Awake community that don't know about what really happened, and they certainly have a lot of people that know about your website that haven't even heard about the radio program. And it's really been a huge service to be able to aggregate all those news stories that we really need to be paying attention to out there. And that's made a big, huge difference for a lot of folks. And the Rivero's Rangers have been out there doing a lot of things and been spawning all these other shows off. I got into doing the talk radio because you inspired me. You're kind of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing in here. And
so it's all my fault.
Yeah, exactly. So, when it all comes to a head and then they have someone to blame, Mike Rivero, it's all his fault.
That's true. Well,
and I inspire some people too. So, this is great.
I have been doing the website since 1994, and I've been doing talk radio since 2007. And so it's been a very, very long time. And I keep hoping that the need for it is going to go away. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening here. And it's kind of this weird inverse. I want the program to be interesting and I want people to be learning from it. And so there's part of me that says, okay, what went corrupt today? What blew up today? What does happen bad? But, you find yourself wishing for bad things to happen just for the sake of your show. And that's a very weird feeling to be in.
Oh, it absolutely is, and we were in the same thing with the programs we were doing earlier on RBN and all the other networks. It's kind of the same thing. We want to dig into all these things. We want the analysis of it. We need more. We need to get deeper down the rabbit hole. We don't want the bad things to happen, but we want the bad things that are happening to come to light. We need to shine a light on this stuff, the stuff that has been hidden all of these decades when they had this control over all the information flow, which has been broken and irrevocably changed by the information paradigm and having this internet thing. And the beautiful thing is, because of what they did, their Achilles heel on this internet thing is they monetized it. So they can't just shut it off. If they shut the internet off and kept us from being able to do this, the entire world economy would collapse tomorrow. It would be done, game over, because they monetized it too heavily and everything is leaning on it. So they have to be very careful. They're trying to censor things in a surgical fashion, but us hacker types out there, the ones that developed all this technology in the first place, will just find a way around it. Because if you've got two computers that can talk to each other, and you've got to have two computers to talk to each other to be able to buy something on Amazon or the like, we will find a way to use VPNs or other technology to continue to, proliferate this information. It'll be the digital equivalent of the sonostat. We will not be silenced. And the more they try to censor us, the more they try to clamp down on us, the more pisses us off and motivates us to get out there and talk even more. So you started something there, Mike. I mean, it probably was going on before we were involved in this, but you've certainly shepherded this along, inspired a lot of people. And I think through our efforts, we've actually slowed this stuff down. I think that if we weren't doing what we were doing here on RBN, that we would be a lot deeper into this. We probably would have already had the nuclear war, and we'd have, zombies and radiation sickness and all that. No, we slowed it down. We haven't defeated it yet, but that's not to say that we won't, because we're going to keep at this. We're not going to give them any rest. We're going to have to pace ourselves on this, because this is a marathon. Unfortunately, the need for this isn't going to disappear tomorrow, but I hope that one day, before too long, we will be able to set down the microphones and walk away from the cameras and just live the rest of our lives and be happy. Hey, wait a minute, we did it. We actually did it, because it's possible. We've seen revolution after revolution throughout history, and it happens. And we're right on the cusp of a global, worldwide revolution. There's too many people in this world absolutely teed off about all this fascism, all this banker abuse, all these endless, pointless wars, mass murdering millions upon millions of people, the pharmaceutical industrial complex murdering almost as many people as the damn wars are. It's absolute lunacy. And that's why we're here, to shine a big, bright, blinking neon light on and say, hey, guys, we need to pay attention to this. This is critical. And if we go after the root cause of all of this stuff, all these symptoms that people are arguing about in the independent media that they can't agree on will all go away. So we got to, like you've been doing this entire time, stay focused on the root, because once we pull that thing up by the root, Michael, we will have won. And I can see that at some point we will be victorious over this. I don't know when it's going to be. I wish it was tomorrow. I wish we could be having a big celebration today, going, we won, we finally ousted all these idiots. But we're getting a little bit closer every day, and we're making them act like fools right in front of everybody. I mean, it's not hidden anymore. It's just ridiculous on its face. We are now, with this government, the laughing stock of the entire rest of the world. They're just pointing at us going, you idiots, what the hell is wrong with you? So maybe this is a good thing. Yeah, we're going to suffer a little embarrassment over this, but hey, guys, that's why we need to get active and do something about it.
We absolutely do. Now, back in 1994, when I started out doing this, I was one of very, very few people who were out there on the internet. This was back in the days of like Usenet, which was the means for sharing articles with a wide audience. And even back then, the government was trying to disrupt it, find ways to shut it down. There was this one time when there was this flood of porn that was all over Usenet that was being cited as justification to shut it down by the Senator Exxon, who was trying to get this amendment put onto the telecommunications bill to say that, email was good and FTP was good, but this Usenet, this ability for single writers to reach a large audience over this networked news posting system, that was really inappropriate. And look, it was just filled with all this evil porn. And back then, of course, before Cyber Command got really kind of skilled, it was very easy to track the IPs on the people posting the porn. And they all went back to military and government computers. So we knew it was a staged crisis, if you will. Today, of course, I am but one of many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of voices that are out there on the internet. And like you, I'd like to see a point where I could put down the microphone and the camera and spend the rest of my life being clear as roadie. I'm not as optimistic as you are that we're getting close to that, but I do see that we are getting close to a collapse. And the big thing is, of course, going to be make sure that whatever government takes root in this country as a follow-on goes back to those original constitutional principles, the Bill of Rights, and just restore some common sense to what's going on here. And every day I see more and more of these stories about how the political correctness is out there, and they want to ban the white walking stick figure on crosswalk lights because it's oppressive, and it just seems like we're collectively being encouraged to become very neurotic, if not completely detached from reality. Anyway, listen, David, thank you for spending time with us this morning, and again, thanks for all the work that you have done on putting this system together, because it's working. As you said before, it's a lot more reliable than Skype, a lot more reliable than YouTube Direct, and there might actually be a marketable product here that other radio networks and stations would want to buy. And
absolutely. And we'll get to that at some point. Right now, this is kind of a beta test, and I'm able to provide one of my favorite talk show hosts the ability to continue reaching out and sharing this information, which is absolutely vital to us all. So, hey, it's a means to an end. Right now, the money out of all of this, where it may come at some point, that doesn't interest me. It's about the truth. It's about, hastening this collapse so we can, sweep up the rug and put things back together. And believe me, I'm one of the most pessimistic people on the planet. I'm very pessimistic about the chances of this government actually surviving. I think you are spot on that, we need to kind of hold on and, wait for the collapse and be ready to, tell those carpetbaggers what for and rebuild this thing with the lessons learned. It'll end up, 100 years from now, being the same darn thing, rinse and repeat. History keeps repeating itself. But maybe for a time, the next generations will actually have the ability to grow, because all of the stuff that we see in this society right now is so damn counterproductive. I mean, how are we going to evolve as a society to the next stage? Because we've talked about this before, how, the spacefaring, nations, we might be right at the cusp of all this stuff, but this technology is capable of destroying this planet 1,000 times over. So maybe all these civilizations that evolve out there in the universe get to this point and they all commit suicide. And I hope that's not the case. That's my pessimism in there. But Michael, I'm going to let you get back to your show. Bless you. Thank you for all you do. You really have made a difference to a lot of people. You got a lot of fans out there, and hopefully you get to take some time off. And don't forget,
you're going to turn me into a raging egomaniac if you keep this up here.
Well, yeah, but sometimes
I'm going to become the next Alex Jones.
You don't toot your horn enough. No, you don't toot your horn enough, Mike. You're a very humble guy, and I have a lot of respect for that. And you need to be recognized for that, especially on your birthday. I mean, good grief. I mean, at least give us that.
I have more humble than any 10 other guys you're going to meet, so I'm really not.
Absolutely.
And of course, Claire's job is to keep me humble.
That's a good thing. She's got a lot of other jobs too. A valuable contributor to the show. We love her unique perspective on here, and we'll be looking forward to her coming back as well. And we're going to do some fun things when you start rebuilding that studio, because I got some more technology I want you to be able to play with. But right now, just keep your nose down, get this move done, and hopefully we'll be able to start enjoying life a little bit. Because if we don't stop every once in a while to smell the roses and enjoy the life that we're fighting to preserve, we've already lost. So take some time off and get some rest, and stay safe out there and enjoy the move. We'll be here with you the entire time. Aloha, Mike.
Aloha. Thanks an awful lot. Aloha and mahalo. And so that was David from Crucial Nonsense, radio host in his own right. And again, he has just done a wonderful service to RBN, setting up this communication system that does work so much better than Skype. And I forget the others that we were trying that just had all these problems. So anyway, on with the show here. We've got a lot to talk about. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And obviously the big story continues to be Hurricane Dorian. They're apparently just now trying to update its status. They've got a Hurricane Hunter airplane out there getting ready to pierce the eye wall. Boy, that's a job that takes a lot of guts to do. And but it is strengthening. They're now expecting it to hit Category 4 just as it hits the Florida Panhandle. But that cone of uncertainty as to exactly where along the coast of Florida it's going to hit, it's like 500 miles long. So it could be anywhere from the Keys almost up to the border of Georgia. And the governor of Florida has flown to the National Hurricane Center, and they're keeping an eye. They've already declared a state of emergency, and they're trying to tell everybody, take the appropriate precautions, get out of the inundation zones. The big problem is they've had so many of these near misses and scares. The concern is that a lot of people down there in Florida are going to say, oh, we've been through this before and we came out fine and it was all a big scare and nothing. And, well, they're hoping people won't just try and say, well, we're just going to stay here and we're going to be all right. Okay, so let's take, we've got calls coming in. Cliff in Indiana. Aloha. Cliff, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, who's your daddy? We're getting ready for you to come on over.
I hope people in Indiana don't find that offensive.
No, they won't. They're good people here. You'll enjoy it. In the area that you're moving is laid back. You'll like the folks.
Oh yeah,
shame
we know that.
Shame y'all are not going to be here on Saturday. We're going to go to a cruise-in, fly-in in Marion, Indiana.
Oh, that would be lovely. That would be lovely. But I'm going to be on a bigger plane than you are.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. What? How long? How many hours is it from Hawaii to, I guess, Los Angeles, probably where you're making the mainland?
Yeah, that's about 5 hours, and then we've got a 1 hour layover to get to our next leg of our flight, which is going to be about 4.5 hours from Los Angeles out to Kentucky, which for some reason we have to land there and then get driven back west across the time zone line to get to Indiana. So it's kind of a weird thing.
Yes, well, it'll be the last time, hopefully. So anyway, we just want to welcome you. You guys get all the rest you can, and let us know if we can help you when you get here.
Well, thank you very much, and I certainly will. I mean, we've got a lot to do. We got to, pick our new post office box keys from Santa Claus. We have to find a place to get into, and new bank accounts, new driver's license. Okay, and let's see. Okay, Cliff, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, and we're going to start. All right, see you soon in Indiana. We're going to start with Peter in Los Angeles. Peter, I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. And I don't think there's going to be any trouble in L.A. Like I said, the layover is just an hour. It's in Terminal 4 of the LAX airport. Yeah, we're just going to get off one plane staggered. Yeah.
Yeah. You need anything, Michael, just I left my number. Give a call. And
I see the number. It's on the screen. I appreciate it. I really do. But I think we're going to be okay. All right, we have to take a break for commercials. Peter, stay on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I know David was saying that, RBN is not about the money. It's about getting the truth out. And he's partly correct. But unfortunately, RBN does have to worry about money because all of this tech costs, paying the electric bill, paying the internet service provider bill, remote servers, whatever it takes to be on there. The system by which this show is sent to our on-air affiliates, that costs a fee every month. And so, RBN is very dependent on its audience for financial support so that we can keep doing what we're doing. Because, as David said, it is important. There's no question that it's important. We're at such a critical time in our nation's history. And we can't give up at this point. We really can't. All right, let's go back to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. What else is on your mind today?
Mike, I've got like 3 or 4 things that are all related, but I want to start out with drawing a contrast between the way that Ilhan Omar is being treated now that they say she had an an affair with a married man kind of thing, and she's being pilloried for that, and they're talking about throwing her out of Congress. There's a lot of serious talk about it. The Democratic Party have already disavowed her. They've already disavowed, by the way, Rashida Tlaib as well, and it's not because of her infidelity or whatever she did with her campaign consultant or whatever. It's everything to do with the fact that she called out Israel and is a champion of the Palestinians. Because I want to point out, Bill Clinton, how many affairs did he have on his right? Everybody knows about that.
Oh, come on, let's be honest here. If you're going to kick people out of Congress for having extramarital affairs, the building would be completely empty.
Yeah, I want to also point out, in the same vein, Kamala Harris, who is a presidential candidate and a darling of the mainstream media, that's the way she got up. She got ahead. She had clearly, even Willie Brown, the former Speaker of the House in the state of California and former mayor of San Francisco, acknowledges that he had an affair with her and that helped her career. He was married at the time, by the way. Doesn't seem to bother them at all that she did that. But Ilhan Omar, it does. And I just wanted to ask another question. First, point out that Whitney Webb, who's a great writer for Mint Press News, wrote a 4-part story on the Jeffrey Epstein thing that is the most in-depth, wonderful piece of journalism I've seen in a long time. She was on Guns and Butter program on NPR. It's hosted by Bonnie Faulkner. And if you can Google it, it's still there. And I sent it to you, Mike. It's an hour-long thing, and it is really in-depth about the connections between MEGA, Mossad, CIA, Epstein, Wexner, all the Bronfman, the whole list of horrible, sordid, criminal characters that are undermining our society. That's the one thing. And I also want to point out one other thing. I sent you an article that Gilad Atzmon did called "Lisbon is the New Jerusalem." Did you see that?
Yes, I think I did. I mean, right now I'm drowning in mail on this laptop, and with the move and everything, I've kind of gotten a little bit behind. But I'm probably going to spend much of the flight catching up, if you will, with the backlog.
Well, what this article is called, it ran on UNS.com, and it's called, Gilad Atzmon wrote it. You can get it on his site as well. Yes. And it was, Lisbon becomes the new Jerusalem. And apparently, under the pressure from the Portuguese Israeli lobby, they passed a law in Portugal that gives anybody who can trace Sephardic, and I know, by the way, I know you've said that you can trace that back, Sephardic ancestry out of out of Portugal to give them dual citizenship capability with Portugal.
Okay.
And so now there's already been they estimate that the papers, the Jerusalem Post is estimating that there are millions, quote, this is what they said, millions of people Israelis who could apply for dual citizenship now with Portugal. And they are doing it at about 2,200 people a month. So they're going to do, these are people, they won't allow Palestinians the right of return, by the way. When they're still holding the keys to their houses, they can see right down the road and have this, but for 400 years ago, they'll allow people, and they're going to take over Portugal just like they've taken over here. But it's well worth the read. And there's one more point I want to make, Mike, actually.
Well,
and that
but you're going to, Peter, you're going to have to wait for a second. We got to take another break for commercials. Don't hang up. We'll come right back to you for that last point that you want to make. And stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, you said you had one more point you wanted to make. Yeah,
and that is, I'm referring back to that Whitney Webb thing on Mid Press News and whatever, talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, Robert Maxwell's daughter. Well, let's call her, Mike, let's call her Giz Maxwell. At any rate, she's still out there. We have, apparently, there's a score of women who have come out and given testimony, certainly enough to slap her in irons and make charges. But there she is, completely out of the news, completely unarrested, and nobody's talking about her. Your program and some places in the free media, but that's it.
Yes.
But that, by the way, they're also not talking about Israel bombing Iraq all over the place.
The silence is deafening on that one.
Mike, I spent time as a contractor in Iraq. I spent time in the military in Iraq, and I spent time in the Rangers as an army officer. And I know a lot of guys in that business still. And I understand that some of the places they bombed, which were ISIS and people like that this is hearsay, but they're telling me, this is informed hearsay, that in some of these facilities or whatever that they bombed, there were American trainers there that could have been killed. And of course, America gave the go-ahead, acquiesced to this, and it could have killed their own people.
That's not my understanding. My understanding is the Pentagon was very much opposed to Israel's bombing of Iraq, precisely for the reasons that you mentioned. There were American personnel on the ground there.
One of my people who used to work for me, her husband's over there directly right now. I just talked with her a day ago. Her husband, she was due to leave Iraq as a contractor last week and was frozen there. And she didn't understand why. And she called me about something else, but brought this up. And I said, well, haven't you heard? Israel has bombed a bunch of places in Iraq, and the Iraqi government has disallowed any flights, any use of American use of airspace. So he's frozen there and can't redeploy back home. Just to let you know, or was frozen there. I haven't talked to him in 2 days. So.
Well, my understanding is the government of Iraq is now demanding that the U.S. forces all leave. So they're going to have to open up the, the flight paths, as it were.
Well, what a wreck our foreign policy is. Is it not?
Oh yeah, it's utter chaos. There's no continuity or consistency to it. It's just sometimes I think that they're making these decisions with a dartboard down in the basement of the White House. Let's see. We're going to invade Poland. We're going to invade. Why Poland? I don't know. That's just what it says on the dartboard.
And the people we're not invading were embargoing and like it's the smooth
tariffs and sanctions and
thousands. Yeah. So, anyways, listen, Mike, we love you. You guys are a rock in our lives. You call me if you need me, and I'll sign up. I know, but taking up too much time.
Well, I saved your phone number here to the show laptop here. Thank you for the phone call. And we're going to switch over to Ken in Fort Worth. Aloha, Ken. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Howdy, howdy. Hey, when and where is Epstein's body going to be shown? Hey, who's getting his money?
Apparently, he's already been interred. I don't know if he was cremated or not, but apparently the story is he's interred in the same mausoleum as his parents, and it's had all identifying marks removed from it out of a concern that people who don't like Jeffrey Epstein might vandalize it. So the real world translation is nobody knows where the body is right now.
Well, who's getting all the money?
Well, I imagine, his estate is being sued by all of his victims. So I'm presuming that probably most of that money is going to go to the lawyers.
Hey, where are you going in Indiana? I never caught it.
Well, we have a post office box in Santa Claus, Indiana, and we're going to be living somewhere around that area, Newburgh, Dale, someplace. Well, we don't know exactly where we're going yet. Obviously, when we hit the ground running Tuesday, we're going to be going on out there and, just trying to find a place to rent.
Yeah. I'm from northern Indiana, and, well, at least you can be close to Floyd Knobs.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, and I always got me confused. North Vernon's in the south and South Bend's in the north. I'll go figure that out, and I'm going.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The lines are now open. Donald Trump has just signed the formal declaration creating a U.S. Space Force. He's appointed a commanding general. And he's out there making these grandiose statements like America's dominance in space will never be questioned. Well, if you're my age and you remember the early history of the space program, we were not dominant. The Soviet Union was. And they cleaned our clock pretty good on a lot of different areas. And it really was a race up until Apollo and the United States finally pulled ahead and did the moon landing. Since then, of course, both the Soviet Union / now Russia and the United States, they tend to stay out of each other's way in space. Outside of the International Space Station, Russia tends to focus on the planet Venus. The United States focuses on Mars. And everybody gets along. But we're going to have this little Space Force, yet another branch of the military on which to pour all kinds of money taken from the American people for what is ultimately going to be a very dangerous system. Because, again, as I've stated before, my concern is if we carry war up to Earth orbit and we start blowing up other people's spy satellites and communication satellites, we're going to create this cloud of debris that is going to impact other satellites, benign satellites, useful satellites, and it'll be a domino effect. It'll be a cascading, increasing cloud of debris that could literally turn near Earth orbit into a no-fly zone for decades to come. But this is Pentagon think here. We've got a new branch of the military, where this is going to be the 5th branch now. And, more money. We've got to have more money for all of this new stuff. By the way, the X-37B space plane has broken its own record for number of days in orbit. It's been up there for well over a year. Nobody has any idea what it's doing. I see, artists' renderings of it with its little hatch open, like the mini space shuttle, and a solar panel unfurled. And my gut is telling me that solar panel they're showing as being unfurled isn't large enough to power that ship. And I think it's a little bit of a dodge there. I would not at all be surprised if there was a radioisotope thermoelectric generator on board that ship, like we have had on Viking, like they have on Curiosity. Curiosity is still going strong. And people are still out there saying things in the photos. Oh, I saw a Bigfoot there in the distance. Look, squint your eyes real hard, and there's it's kind of weird what people will see in those pictures. I remember the big furor over the face on Mars that was caught by the Viking orbiter, and everybody said, oh, it's proof there's intelligent life. And, then, of course, the orbiter got into a much closer view and realized it was just, a mountain. And human brains are wired to look for faces as part of our, getting along with the rest of the tribe. But I remember, there was an entire movie, Red Planet, that was, built on the idea that there was a face there. Anyway, so a lot of people are talking now, of course, about the Inspector General report coming on out and finding that former FBI Director James Comey did, in fact, violate FBI policy in his retention of and leaking of emails with memos with classified information in them. And still, no arrests, no handcuffs, no perp walk. The Department of Justice has already said they're not going to be prosecuting him. He's one of the insiders. We don't arrest and jail the insiders. Jail is just for the hoi polloi, the poor people out there. But at least they're saying that, yes, he did violate FBI policy. Okay, great. I'm not surprised. I imagine probably a lot of people in the FBI violate the FBI policies. Why wouldn't they? Nothing happens. So, all right, Dorian is still out there. Apparently, the panic buying has started in the stores in Florida, and apparently the state government has had to enact emergency anti-price gouging legislation, which is a very, very good idea. And I understand that stores are there to make money, to engage in commerce, to sell products, but taking advantage of an impending disaster to run up the prices, I think, shows very little community spirit. And we've seen the same thing here in Hawaii. We've had a couple of hurricane scares out here, not to mention tsunamis. And you'll walk into the store to get some extra bottled water or food, and you'll see the clerk with the price gun going right down the road. Well, it's all done on computers now, but you get the idea. Over in the Middle East, again, a lot of people are still talking about Israel's attack on Iraq. And they're talking about it because it's not unique. Israel has been attacking, committing aggressions against its neighbor nations pretty much all along. Now, over in the UN General Assembly, Resolution 3314, and yes, I know General Assembly resolutions are not considered legally binding, only Security Council resolutions are, but it says, no nation may legally attack another state preemptively. The UN General Assembly has said this idea of a preemptive attack, of a preemptive war, is wrong and illegal, and it's downright silly. Anybody can make up an excuse, they're building a Death Star over there. We have to nuke them. And that's what we're seeing NATO and Israel do time and time again. Israel justified the bombing of Iraq's nuclear power station at Osirak by saying, well, we have good authority. They're starting to build nuclear bombs there. And it was a flat-out lie. Following the U.S. conquest of Iraq, international experts examined the remains of the reactor complex at Osirak. They discovered that there was no bomb factory underneath. It was all a big lie. And that's why this idea of a preemptive war is so dangerous. Anybody can tell a lie about somebody. Oh, Assad's got sarin gas. Saddam has nuclear weapons. And, Maduro is sacrificing children to the god Moloch. And you can come up with a lie and say, well, we don't have a choice. We have to invade. We have to attack. And anybody can step back and take a look and realize who the aggressor is. So the U.S. and Israel, they're really cranking up the stakes for more Middle East war. And we know the ultimate goal is they want to go into Iran. And it is very, very sad. All the people who are going to die for corporate profits, for ego, for vanity. Yes, if I smash up enough countries, there'll be a statue made to me, and pigeons of the world shall rejoice. All righty. Apparently, CNN has hired Andrew McCabe, which I think illustrates the close relationship between the corporate media and the government. And apparently CNN hired McCabe even though there is rumblings that he may be arrested. I don't know. They just let Comey off the hook again. I think McCabe's going to walk as well. All right. Now, you've probably seen a lot of news about this Greta Thunberg, who went to New York for this global warming summit, and to avoid contributing to climate change, she sailed in a yacht. And it made for really good imagery. See, wind power, we're sailing over there. We're not putting out any carbon, ignoring the carbon that was emitted by the construction of the yacht. And there's just one problem, though. Now that Greta is in New York at the conference, the yacht has to be returned back to Europe. And so they're having to fly the entire sailing crew out to New York to take the yacht back. So her journey, in point of fact, was not carbon neutral. It was a PR stunt. It was a publicity stunt. And too much of public opinion is being shaped with publicity stunts rather than actual hard news and, what's actually going on. And, okay, just got to take a look at the clock here. Apparently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is out there trying to support Ilhan Omar. Alexandria was out there with this ridiculous Instagram video where she's out there saying that today's generation is more engaged and involved in solving the problems of the world. Well, I don't know, what about the 60s civil rights, the 60s stop the war in Vietnam, and that generation of teenagers that fought World War II? We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And it's kind of weird. Every time I'm hearing the bump music, I'm reaching over trying to find the mixer to put up my volume. But, of course, the mixer is in a container parked in Honolulu Harbor. We're told it will actually sail tomorrow with all of our possessions, which means Saturday when we fly out, we'll be able to look down and wave at our furniture from 35,000 feet. As you know, I'm a science buff. And so sometimes there are stories that will show up at the website that I find really interesting. And one has to do with the dives, if you will, archaeological dives of HMS Terror. And HMS Terror, for you history buffs out there, was one of two British ships. The other one was the HMS Erebus that were sent north of Canada to research the Great Northwest Passage, which has always been a dream to shorten the amount of time that it would take for cargo to go back and forth from Europe to Asia. And the mission, unfortunately, failed, and nobody's even sure what happened to the captain and crew. But the remains of the ships were found in the early 2000s. I think they found the Erebus in 2004. and the terror in 2006. They're sitting in highly silty, freezing water, and the ships are in stunningly good condition. And so they've sent down these ROVs to take a look, and the pictures are really quite fascinating. Now, speaking of salvage, nobody could talk about underwater salvage without thinking of Dr. Robert Ballard, who's the man who found the remains of the RMS Titanic. His latest expedition did not end as well. He's basically run out of time and money. He was down on what used to be called Gardner Island, trying to find evidence of what happened to Amelia Earhart. And they found some tantalizing little clues, like a sheet of metal with what appear to be rivet holes, except they found one of those before. But there's no firm or final artifact that can say, yeah, this was where Amelia's Lockheed Electra wound up. And so I'm sorry that it didn't work, both because I'm an admirer of Bob Ballard and because I think it's a mystery. It's time to get it solved and move on. But there are people who are completely just focused and obsessed on Amelia Earhart and what happened to her. I remember there was this show when they were talking about when they finally found the body of King Richard III. And, or was it the second, the one who was hunchback? Anyway, and there was this society devoted to Richard, who were convinced that the stories of him being hunchback were pure political propaganda, that he was a manly man and sturdy. And when they found the skeleton and revealed it, he did suffer major scoliosis. They cried. They were so upset. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification, and we're going to come back and actually get into some real news. You can kind of tell I'm in a goof-off mood here on my birthday. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And so call on in, and let's just talk about whatever we're going to talk about. So again, bad news about Ballard's expedition. And I remember when we first moved here, and we knew a group that was trying to mount an expedition down there as well. All righty, so apparently Virgin Atlantic has gone politically correct, and they are now featuring a black woman as their flying icon, getting rid of the traditional pinup girls and replacing them with images representing modern Britain. Well, if you want to represent modern Britain, I would say that would probably be a Middle Eastern migrant wielding a large knife at you. All righty. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Democrats are coming out with a new idea for taxation. And apparently they're getting tired of trying to tax income because we don't have any anymore. So now they're looking at it targeting wealth. They're going to tax the rich, which has always been kind of the platform of the Democrats, but somehow they never really seem to get around to it. It sounds really good, but you know, eventually those rich people, they show up with their checkbooks and they write a campaign donation and they get to keep all their money. I think this country was doomed on the day when limits to campaign donations were removed. That was really where it was. Okay, good day on the stock market. But we're still seeing all these experts out there saying there has to be a correction soon, and that we could be looking at $50 silver and $2,500 gold. And so if you've got these metals, hang on to them. So, okay. Apparently, James Comey, responding to the Inspector General report, came on out saying, this completely exonerates me, said actually accused the Inspector General of being insane, and he's demanding an apology. So here we go. Apparently, the protests in Hong Kong are still going on, and the Beijing government is considering a military action to crush the pro-democracy protests. I'm not sure that it's really pro-democracy. I think it started for economic reasons, but I think the American media and the government are trying to basically make it sound like these people are after democracy, because that's always the prelude to destabilizing another country. And there is absolutely no question in my mind that the U.S. government would like to destabilize both China and Russia and do a regime change from within to governments that are more cooperative with American corporate interests here. So people are looking at the central banks. They're realizing that the era of unbridled growth is over. And there are a lot of industry experts who are very, very worried, which means you should be too. Okay. A lot of small stuff here. Apparently, the Mueller gang set up an innocent woman and then lied about it by withholding pertinent information, and she got sent to jail. Seeing a lot about that. Ilhan Omar is out there saying that there are efforts to smear her character, but refuses to answer stupid questions about shenanigans. I keep looking at the antics of people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Omar, and I don't agree with this idea of just kicking them out of the Congress. But you do wonder, is this really the best that we can do for leadership? Oh. Righty. Okay, we talked about this the other day, where over in New York City, de Blasio, in order to fight inequality, is dumping New York City's gifted and talented programs. Now, New York is famous for the so-called schools, and School of the Arts being the one made famous in movies and TV series, and basically being the launching platform for a lot of the big stars that came out of New York. And there's a school specifically devoted to music. There's a school devoted to science and engineering. And they're getting ready to shut them down. And it turns out the reason they're getting ready to shut them down is that somebody complained that too few Black and Latino students were getting into these schools. Well, these schools are based on merit. You have to audition for the arts and music schools. You have to take tests for the engineering and science schools. And sorry, they're not making it. It's not racism. It is simply the reality. I got to deal with this myself when I was teaching remedial math in Southern California, where, because it was a remedial math class, I did have a lot of the Black and Latino students. And they just couldn't get it. And that's just the reality here. And we have to get away from all this PC, self-checking thoughts and get back to, what is the reality of what's happening here? Well, the reality is some people are just smarter than other people. That's the reality. And you cannot mandate equality. So they try and mandate equality of outcome. And it's disincentivizing the kind of achievement and excellence that our society is desperately in need of. You see kids going to school and, why should I try? I'm going to get the same grades as, the dullard over here to keep things equal and fair. Speaking of New York, apparently the monument erected to the 9/11 first responders has been vandalized. I can't for the life of me imagine why anybody would do that, but they did. Apparently, the Border Patrol has unveiled 60 miles of new U.S.-Mexico border wall. Somebody's actually put up an interactive map showing the 84 miles of wall that has been built by the Trump administration. Now, much of that has been basically replacing wall that was corroded, rotted, rusted, cut through, torn down by the people smugglers. But that's just 84 miles, less than 100 miles. I keep thinking about this story about how back in the 1990s, there was actually a bill that passed Congress to fund 700 miles of border wall, of which just 34 miles was built. And I have not been able to find a hint of where the rest of that money went or who it was who said, we have to stop building now. But 100 miles of border wall to protect a border that is basically 2,000 miles long. Doesn't sound like it's going to work. Getting on back to the central bankers, you've probably been hearing a lot of news about the negative rates, negative interest rates. And that means that if you have a savings account in one of these banks, they will help themselves to your money. Now, I remember when I was a kid in the good old days, you'd put your money in the savings account and you'd come back to it a little later. There'd be a little more in there because the bank was using your money. And they would split the interest with you. Well, actually, they kept most of the interest. And we were encouraged to save. And now it's gone into the reverse. The banks want to charge you for storing your money. And, of course, they're not really storing it. It's not like they roll it into the vault at nighttime. They're still out there lending it, charging interest on it, hypothecating it. But now they want to take it on both ends, including your end. And I can imagine as more and more people realize that's what's happening to their savings accounts, that they're going to start pulling their money out of the banks. And that's when the banks are really going to start pushing for the cashless society. You're going to have to keep your cash in some bank somewhere. And yes, they're going to help themselves to it. But think of all the wonderful services they are providing to you. Boy, I remember when I was a kid, you opened a bank savings account. Not only did you get interest, they'd give you a toaster. Always a good thing to have here. Okay, apparently, this is Gilad Atzmon again, talking about Jeff Epstein. And apparently, as Epstein's heritage, there's a group called Zwi Migdal. It's a Jewish global crime syndicate that operated a century ago and trafficked tens of thousands of Jewish women and underage girls as sex slaves, turning Argentina into a nightmare of prostitution and exploitation. I find that very surprising that they trafficked Jewish women as opposed to others, but apparently that's what they did. We actually have a caller on the line. Dave in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wanted to touch base. You were talking about the central banks, and I was curious, even though this isn't about central banks, is that in this so-called booming economy, at least where I'm living, a 150-year-old newspaper is shutting down at the end of this week. And on top of that, we're always hearing about how the stock market is doing, and it seems like everybody who has anything to say about the Dow makes it either go up or go down. But I'm wondering, how is it that it's come to be that after hours trading is allowed to take place? It seems to me that the 1%ers have enough of an advantage as it is. I'm just interested in what you have to say. Thanks.
Well, the economy is not booming. The propagandists are going to go on saying that it's booming, and that if you're on hard times and going hungry and you lost your home, it had to be something that you did wrong, and we're not going to blame the government because the government never makes a mistake with the economy. That being said, we know the stock market is being manipulated. The stock market, which was originally set up to allow ordinary citizens to participate in the growing U.S. economy, now it's become just this giant open-air casino for the ultra-rich. And frankly, I think most ordinary citizens have already dumped their stocks. But yes, this after-hours trade, it's just another way to play the game and let the hardcore addicts, continue their little fixation around the clock. Dave, are you there? Oh, okay. Guess he's not. All righty. Another case, Texas. Family is fighting Child Protective Services trying to get their son back. These Child Protective Services, again, started out with a good idea, protect the children from abusive parents, turned into a racket. The more kids to grab, the more money they get from the state budget, the more grandiose their offices and staff can be. And so you get a lot of abuses. When you put a financial incentive on a certain behavior by a government agency, you're going to get that behavior. If you're paying a government agency to hunt down and burn the witches, they're going to hunt down and burn people they think are witches. We saw that mechanism before. We're seeing it again. Back in the 1990s, during the so-called rape crisis, people were being financially incentivized. Oh, rape. Got another rape over here. We got another one. Let's keep score. Apparently, a Chinese student was barred from entering the United States after informing customs officers that he had a bulletproof vest in his luggage. Now, the reason he had the bulletproof vest is because the United States now has an image around the world where people are getting shot dead in the streets. And he just wanted to have the bulletproof vest. What I can't understand is why customs would have a problem with that. I mean, yes, if he'd come on in with an AK-47 or an AR-15 or something like that, I could see there'd be an issue. But a bulletproof vest? Why not? That should be an item in the store. I mean, they're already making bulletproof backpacks for school kids. Bulletproof coats and... Yeah, sure. Why not? Big business. So the Chinese are very, very upset. And they're literally saying, how are we going to be able to visit the United States and know that we're safe if we're not allowed to bring bulletproof vests with us? Okay. Let's see. We have a caller on the line. Terry in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, you mentioned a PC speech, and I think it's just a lead into fully controlled speech like you have in a fully communist country. In other words, you're just getting used to it. They'll start enforcing this PC speech, and then, they'll expand that to stuff if you criticize the government or do these other things, that they're going to crack down on
It's not
you.
just that; they're protecting commerce. I mean, they're starting to filter out people's concerns about vaccines because they want you to go spend that money and pump this stuff into your kid's arm because that's good for business. And we kind of learned the hard way this last week ourselves. There is a big business in companies that for a fee will polish your online reputation. And this has to do with one of the companies that is transporting our stuff that had an absolutely great online reputation. But when we were trying to deal business with them, we couldn't get an answer on the phone. And so I went on out and I did a little deeper web search and found out that a lot of people had problems with this company. But when you go to, they're trying to consolidate customer reviews the way they consolidated social media so that people don't go on out and read actual reviews by real people. They go to like Yelp or RottenTomatoes.com. And these can now be filtered to support commerce. And apparently it's a big business and, there's no laws against it. But yeah, online speech is being controlled. It's being absorbed, as it were, bit by bit.
Right. And you mentioned like Israel bombed Iraq.
Yeah.
Ryan Christian had this article about they hit 3 countries in
Terry?
24 hours. Yeah.
Terry, I'm going to have to put you on hold. Don't hang up. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Terry in California. We're talking about how bit by bit, in the hope that we're not going to notice it, which is too late because we already did, the corporations, which have now become the focal point of social media, which is sort of contrary to the original design purpose of the internet, which was just global peer-to-peer with no central point that would allow for content to be controlled. Now that they've got that, now that we've all been lured into Twitter and FaceTime and the rest of it, they're starting to have these automated filtering systems to filter out conservative content, to filter out content that is bad for somebody's business, like the vaccine industry, to basically control online discussions and take away from us that freedom that we've had over all these years to basically share our ideas with each other. And that's really what it's all about. They want to silence the individual's voice so that only the corporate and government voices remain on the internet. You, Mike Rivero in Indiana, no, you don't have an audience anymore. We've deemed you inappropriate. And in your place, we're going to impose some commercials for the latest vaccine, something like that. Anyway, so Terry, what's your next thought?
Well, I was going to switch over to Israel and
okay, go ahead and switch over to Israel.
And the attacks they're making on these other countries. Ryan Christian said they attacked 3 countries in less than 24 hours. One was Iraq,
yes.
Another one was Syria, and I think he's starting to hit Lebanon now a little bit too.
Yes, yeah, he's hitting Lebanon.
Yeah, and their excuse is Iran's in there, or Hezbollah, of course, is supported a little bit by Iran. And I think my idea is they're trying to do as much as they can. The settlements in the West Bank, and they're also increasing settlements in the Golan Heights. And they want to do as much as they can while they got Trump, because
yes.
They know, I mean, it's probably all the candidates, but, he's most favorable to them. Right now, he's got their Jared Kushner right in his right, the White House there right at his side. And I don't think he's going to make a second term because he made that ridiculous statement about Puerto Rico. I don't know if you talked about that. But
yeah, I mean, somebody needs to remind Donald Trump that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. You know, and we do have some responsibility for what's going on down there.
Yeah, the hurricane was kind of towards it, and he said, they cost us too much money last time, you know, and it's just not presidential. I mean, he used to talk about presidential speech. Well, he sure doesn't have it. And
Nope.
stuff like that, he's not going to make it the second time, you know. There's a lot of people just going away because none of the promises were touched, except for
No,
Israel.
I don't.
You know, that was really
Yeah, no, he's been a disappointment, no doubt about it. But you know, it's weird. The Democrats don't seem to be able to mount a credible candidate. I mean, they're all a joke. You've got Pocahontas out there. You've got Bernie Sanders, who managed to smack himself in the face with a punching bag. You've got Joe Biden, whose malapropisms are continuing to sink his ratings. I mean, there's nobody in that entire Democratic lineup that strikes me as somebody I would want to have the job. And that's why I'm getting very, very worried they're going to mount a draft Hillary movement, pull her back in.
Yeah. And I'm starting to think that how much worse should it be? You know, what she'll do is just turn the government over to the Midcontinent, if they want to do, just like George Bush, and we could have a big war, and that'd be a lot worse. But I didn't think pretty good about Trump. He's dragging his feet, but he's probably getting all this pressure to go into Iran from the generals, you know, because they know it's going to be a disaster. And but Hillary may not, you know, she might do that. But outside of that, I don't know how much worse she could be for the country. But that's a serious thing.
Right now, my concern is that if we get a liberal president and a liberal Congress, we're going to see more of this insanity about, you know, you can use whatever the bathroom that you imagine you are today, and this whole PC liberal stuff. And it's driving the country crazy, and it's based on a lie. It's based on one of the biggest intellectual frauds in history, and they believe it's real. Anyway, listen, Terry, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back, assuming the online censors don't pull the plug on us, because we're saying double plus ungood things. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones here to Scott in Dallas. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I just want to touch on something. This is a bill, a New Hampshire bill that was just failed in their election or whatever about like 3 or 4 months ago. It's House Bill 507 FNA local, and it's regarding the right to travel. And a lot of people are all confused. Oh, do we have the right to travel or not? Well, this bill completely defines in legal terms everything that a person needs to know. And the reason I'm getting this out there is if people can go to rurallawradio.com, and we're really delving into this and how we want to get it out there to all these public officials so that they cannot say that they do not know what the law is. In fact, they're deemed to know the law. But anyhow, just in the analysis, this bill restates the right to travel, in quotes, and requires the Department of Safety to provide at no cost to all non-commercial automobile and non-commercial conveyance owners a decal and identification card that states the holder is exempt from registering his or her automobile or other private conveyance under the superior authority of RSA of the Uniform Commercial Code, which provides exemptions for non-taxable consumer goods, in quotes, and household goods, in quotes. This bill
Now,
also repeals...
Scott, you told me that this bill failed in the legislature up in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah, can I finish?
You can, but it seems like you're kind of flogging a dead horse. Go ahead.
Okay, there's a reason for this. This bill also repeals requirements for certain travelers or drivers to acquire non-commercial driver's license. It repeals the driver's license. And it's flogging a dead horse because nobody knew about it, I'm sure, in New Hampshire. And the amount of people that didn't even show up to vote, because I spoke to the clerk of the courthouse or whatever, the state house. But this just goes in to define what people don't know. And if they had this piece of paper, why aren't they cramming it down their representatives' throats saying, we know the truth here? Just reading the statement of purpose, 3 sentences. That was only 2 sentences I read. Statement of purpose. The General Court finds that the jurisdiction and authority of the Department of Safety is limited to only commercial users of the public ways, and that the corporate state employees have, by their silence, failed to fully inform the sovereign people of the state that an automobile has been confirmed by Chief Justice Grimes in 108 New Hampshire to be private property defined as household goods and consumer goods, not for commerce use or for profit or for gain. Further, the courts have found that the corporate public servants who ignore their accountability as mandated in Article 8 of the New Hampshire Bill of Rights by their silence and failure to fully inform the sovereign people of the consequences arising from the corporate offer to contract is deemed silent deception and inducement by fraud, as well as committing the tort of conversion when taking or seizing the certificate of origin in violation of a Fifth Amendment. So, with that, everybody that knows or that has heard about the right to travel, this confirms it because it goes and it identifies what a traveler is, what a driver is. It tells you exactly what the legal terms are, the terms of art. And so if everybody knew about this, if everybody got their document and took it to the representative saying, why aren't you standing up for our rights? We actually know more than you and you're deemed to know this. So that's all I got for you.
Okay, well, Scott, certainly a lot of very flowery language here, but you yourself said this bill failed in New Hampshire. Okay, so it's basically everything in it is null and void. Now, I have a hard time thinking that states are going to give up requiring that cars be registered because they generate revenue from that. And it's actually a good thing to have a license plate on your car in case it gets stolen, which I went through myself a couple of years ago. As far as having a driver's license, I think we're justified in making sure that only people who are competent can drive on the road. So I can understand why this bill did not get very far. And there are certain services and certain things that the government does that are a benefit to the public, and regulating the roads, regulating drivers, keeping us safe on the roads, I think is definitely an important part of it. I wish they would spend more time repairing the roads or keeping the roads in good shape. Anyway, Scott, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And every once in a while, we get a caller into the show who seems to have this idea that he's got a magic incantation which will free us of the imposed obligation of having to register our cars or having to get a driver's license. And it's nice fantasy wishful thinking, but it's just not real world. And this show is about real world. Speaking of real world, something that didn't really get a lot of coverage again on the corporate media, there was a massive earthquake off the coast of Oregon, 6.3, right on part of that Cascadia subduction zone. And, they've been having a lot of small quakes up there. A lot of people are getting very, very nervous about what's happening up there because it is estimated there is a lot more pressure on the Cascadia subduction zone fault than there is on the San Andreas. And were that to let go all at once, we're talking about the city of Seattle being totally wiped out by the tsunami. It seems like Mother Nature isn't very happy with the United States right now because all these bad things are happening, like Hurricane Dorian, the Central Plains flooding, and of course we haven't been the best behaved planetary neighbor either. But that's very worrisome about having that quake. All righty, getting on back here to the news. Apparently, the U.S. Department of Justice has filed a lawsuit accusing the Baltimore County Police Department of racial discrimination in its hiring practices. So at least the Department of Justice is suing somebody. I'd rather they were suing Comey or McCabe. All right, so there's still a big stink going on about Lawrence O'Donnell over at MSNBC, who ran with a story yesterday saying that some of Donald Trump's outstanding loans were being held by Russian oligarchs with links to Vladimir Putin. The story turned out to be completely bogus. MSNBC and Lawrence O'Donnell now have egg all over their faces. He's been forced to retract and apologize. And apparently, O'Donnell got hoaxed by a user over on 4chan. Apparently, somebody posted this on 4chan. O'Donnell said, oh, great, we can use this to go after the president. Didn't fact check it. Has burned himself and MSNBC's credibility, as if there's any of it left here. Now, when I was in college, I had to take some non-major elective courses, and I took a year of journalism. And back then, the rules were pretty simple. You double check everything. You get a second source for everything. You never publish unless you know for a fact that what you're publishing is the plain, unvarnished truth. And today we're seeing professional media, corporate media like MSNBC, they're rushing to air with rumors they're getting off the internet. That's not journalism. So I'd like to see O'Donnell get fired, not because I have any particular issue with him personally, but maybe if some of these prostitutes and correspondents were to lose their job over this kind of shoddy reporting, we wouldn't see the shoddy reporting anymore. Okay. Now, up in New York, they just passed a law that is going to erase marijuana convictions for 10,872 New Yorkers. Gone from the record. Won't show up in a police search, won't show up in an employment search. I think that's a good thing. I mean, compared to some of the stuff that's out there, I mean, marijuana is pretty low-key. And talk about lousy timing, they're getting ready to decriminalize it here in Hawaii. And we got some of the best stuff in the world. And, of course, now the big rage is vaping. Oh, everybody, the vaping. There's been a death from vaping, and got to stop vaping. I think the tobacco companies are behind all of this. All right, for those of you who are still following Jeff Epstein, you're going to love this next story. Apparently, there actually were cameras in the hallway outside Jeff Epstein's jail cell, which could see into his jail cell. And apparently, both of them malfunctioned the night of his death. One of them is so weird, has video for the whole first part of the night, then the video becomes unusable during the time of death, and then all of a sudden, it's usable again, according to the FBI. We have no idea what happened. Boy, oh boy, the FBI isn't what it's portrayed to be on TV and movies. Pretty obvious what happened. The cameras were shut down and the video was sabotaged to cover a murder. Even Epstein's own lawyers are saying they don't buy the suicide, and I don't buy the suicide. And I don't think Epstein is interred with his parents in that mausoleum. I think he's down there in the Cayman Islands playing canasta with Ken Lay. Because that's the only way that they could keep him from activating his dead man switches on all these top politicians. I think Epstein is still alive. No. Apparently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is still on her campaign to abolish the Electoral College. Let's just make it a popularity vote across the country, and then we don't have to worry about campaigning in states like Indiana. We just campaign in the big cities. Amazing here. All right. National Hurricane Center is now saying Tropical Storm Dorian could hit Orlando, Florida as a Category 4 on Labor Day. That's the latest update we have on that one. And again, if you are anywhere along that coast, get inland, get supplies. They're saying this could easily be the worst hurricane to hit Florida in the last 30 years. That's 30. Err on the side of caution here. Apparently, the Department of Homeland Security is now barring Democrats from visiting the border facilities. Apparently, Democratic staffers were rude to the ICE officers and engaged in disruptive behavior. Well, we know that the Democrats' agenda is to get the borders open, to keep them order, to get all those illegal immigrants registered to vote, to get them ready to vote next year. By the way, Fox News was running a story. Apparently, a poll is showing that almost half the American people are concerned about the accuracy and eligibility of next year's vote, and they ought to be. We've got the crookedest election system on earth. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. A couple of things. Number one, regarding the thing with the Inspector General's report on Comey.
Yeah.
This regards 7 memos. As soon as I heard that he wrote those memos, at the time, way back when, I asked, what kind of standing can that have? There's no witnesses. There's no notarization. There's no nothing. It's just something that he decided to write in his car on his laptop. This has no meaning whatsoever. That's one thing. Now, another thing is with regard to Kirsten Gillibrand, just a little point of humor here. I've always I call her up before this when the switchboard opens before they get into their office in D.C. Some senators and reps. So I want to call her up after Labor Day and leave a message that I congratulate her on resigning, and I hope that she'll also resign from her Senate seat, because she is really just she's just so phony, so plastic. It's horrible.
Well, they all are.
She changed. Yeah, that's true. But she's like, you're sure most of them are. They are. But she's really out front with that, especially, she changed her opinion on guns when she was upstate New York and downstate New York.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. Now, and that's another thing with this with the IG's report. That doesn't mean I hear people like on NPR, they say he wasn't indicted. They said, and I quote on the NPR News an hour ago, the FBI decided not to indict him. We know already that the FBI does not indict. The Attorney General indicts. So they're already slushing their language around.
Yeah, they are. They're basically replaying the Hillary exoneration. He didn't mean to do wrong. And, but again, Comey clearly was in violation of Title 18 in that he wrote classified information into those memos and then distributed the memos to where they got to the media. That's a Title 18 violation right there. That's a felony.
Right. But again, even if it is a felony, they would have no standing either way in a court of law. There's nothing on them. There's no witnesses, nothing. This is what he decides to write down.
It doesn't matter. The information on one of the memos is known to be classified. Okay, and just forwarding that information along doesn't matter what the content actually is. That's the felony violation right there. Now, Comey broke. Yeah, okay. So, frankly, the Department of Justice should have prosecuted him. And, again, they don't eat their own.
Yeah, now, well, we'll see where it goes, but people are starting to think that
it's not going to go anywhere. Comey's going to keep his head down for a couple of months, and then he'll be back in another government position. Anyway, listen, Jim, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Fred in Iowa. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy. What's on my mind is Epstein and fantasy. But first of all, I'd like to say to Scott, my respect. Keep calling and call other hosts. And now, Michael, you had in college journalism teaching and research. Well, by golly, I've even researched on the internet about Epstein.
Okay.
Now, I don't think whether Epstein is dead or alive or drinking a mid-julep in Alabama or in the Virgin Islands or Russia, I don't think our nation will fall or stand if we hear about the most current titillating news about Epstein and about Fantasyland. Mr. Scott, he put out valuable information. Oh, well, he may be fantasy because he's quoting the law, but you don't know it. But you've been quoting the law of God when you mention earthquakes, fire, tsunamis, and all this. Well,
I see those as forces of nature.
Well, by golly, do you believe in a nature or the creator of nature, the God of nature?
I believe in the reality of what I can see around me, and I've been through earthquakes, I've seen volcanic eruptions, I've seen tsunamis. That's the reality. Now, in terms of Scott's observations, there are a lot of people who are, in this country who are tired of all the little fees and the chipping away at your wealth that happens at levels of government, whether it's the county government, city government, state government, and they're trying to dream that there's some kind of magical way to get away from that. It's just not so. These various jurisdictions have set these up because they depend on the revenue streams, and they're not going to let us go.
Oh, they're trying. There's people out there like Scott that are trying under the conditions of the laws that are on the books right now to do something. But when we go into
Fred, Scott started out his entire screed saying that the bill that he was talking about had failed to pass. Therefore, it was irrelevant. Whatever is said in it has no bearing. So,
laws that you say and a lot of people say are irrelevant. Well, if people stick their head in the sand and don't try and do fight, but we want to listen to
Fred, got to let you go. Got to do a break for station identification. We'll be right back with hour number 3 of our program. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to this embarrassment over at MSNBC with Lawrence O'Donnell, it turns out that Alyssa Milano got caught up in that whole thing because apparently she was using the story about how Trump's loans are being held, at least in part, by these Russian oligarchs with connections to the evil Vladimir Putin. And she went out there trying to shame Trump supporters. How can you support Trump when he's obviously, under the sway of Vladimir Putin? And of course, the story has now blown up. Lawrence O'Donnell got hoaxed by a user on 4chan, didn't check his facts, just went with it. And Alyssa saw it, said, hey, this looks good. I can use this to attack Trump supporters, and just went with it. And it's turned into a huge embarrassment because these people have forgotten the rules of real journalism, which is multiple sources, everything confirmed. You check your facts. You don't just go with wild rumors. We've got too many wild rumors. And we don't get the facts here. Now, I'll give you a good example. They just recently had the hearing to formally end the charges against Jeff Epstein, now that he is, in theory, dead. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. And apparently 30 victims of Epstein testified at the hearing, and the media ignored it. No, we're going to go with the story about Trump's loans being held by Russian oligarchs. So, apparently over at the European Central Bank, they're looking at a new stimulus plan. Seeing a lot of stuff about the economy, tariffs affecting the market negatively, people getting laid off. They've got good bosses, but everyone's concerned the economy is going to take a downturn. And the PC police are back over there at George Washington University, where the school administrators have given in to students who protested against the school's mascot, Colonial. And it used to be called Colonial Central. Now they're going to rename it to Student Services Hub, because colonial means oppression. You know, go back and look through history. At some point in history, everybody has oppressed everybody else. The Vikings oppressed the Europeans oppressed each other, the Romans oppressed everybody. It's just ridiculous. Oh, excuse me. Now, apparently the College Board announced that it had abandoned plans to add a so-called adversity score to the Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SAT. And David Coleman, who's CEO of the College Board, insists he listened to thoughtful criticism of the proposal, which presumed to measure student hardship by tabulating socioeconomic data, such as average family income, crime rates, educational attainment in the applicants' neighborhoods. But on closer examination, the College Board seems to have preserved the misbegotten adversity score under a different name. And so basically, when your kid goes in to take the SAT, they could actually lose out to another student who simply ranks higher on the, oh, woe is me, my life's adversity is higher than yours. Apparently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made this bizarre video. Well, she's making a lot of them. That one basically dissing the World War II generation. But she's made another video admitting climate change wakes her up at night. And she's also worried about diseases escaping the melting glaciers. Now, there is some legitimate science there, that buried in those glaciers there could be ancient microbes, that as the glaciers reach the edge of the shore and they calve into icebergs, could be released, but it's remote. It's a remote possibility. But for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this is what worries her. Germs and icebergs. Okay. Somebody's actually done some research saying that fake news stories do cause some real damage, that voters will form false memories. They'll think they actually witnessed whatever it was. We know about false memory syndrome. It's a real problem. And the other problem is that very often they'll miss the retractions. Now, I'm not watching MSNBC, so I don't know Florence O'Donnell is doing more than just one apology. Obviously, the other networks are carrying the story because it makes them look good by comparison. But we've seen in the past when media gets caught in a huge lie. I mean, the lie gets the banner headline above the fold. Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. And when it finally becomes obvious that was a lie, the retraction is buried on page 37 underneath the obituaries. Apparently, Rashida Tlaib came out with a tweet that denounced America and apparently the Declaration of Independence. Now, them's fighting words, Rashida. You don't mess with the Declaration. It's not a functioning part of our government anyway, so it's irrelevant. Okay. Apparently, YouTube just took down 100 videos produced by Prager University, which in turn has sparked a lawsuit. Now, we know that YouTube is taking down videos of conservative content, health content, vaccine criticism, but apparently, they took down activist posts, but apparently Prager University is considered a liberal school. They've had their videos removed. They're taking legal action to try and determine once and for all what is the mechanism that's at play at these social media companies that determines what does and does not get cut and censored. Because nobody seems to know. It does seem at times rather arbitrary. Maybe it's another case of a dartboard. You know, this video gets to say, that video goes, that video gets to stay, so forth and so on. Getting back to the world of political correctness, Marvel Studios has basically going to launch the next film series, The Eternals, will include Marvel Comics' first openly gay superhero. My instinct is telling me this will not do very well. And again, for the reason I said earlier in the show, I don't care if somebody's gay. I just don't want to have it constantly being shoved in my face. I don't know about you, but I go to movies to be entertained. I want to laugh. I want to enjoy a fantasy. I want to see an alternate universe like Avatar. I don't want to go to a movie and have political correctness and social justice just blasted at me like we're in some kind of sick 1984. So, no, I will not be going to see this movie. Anyway. Apparently Ilhan Omar's affair with a married DC consultant is coming back to haunt her. And the wife of Omar's lover has filed for divorce, insisting that her marriage was ultimately destroyed by the tryst between the congresswoman and her husband. Previous reports claimed that Omar dumped her own husband earlier in the summer. Boy, they're just switching all over the place here. And I think the comment I made earlier in the show applies here. I don't approve of that kind of behavior. And but I think it's silly to talk about kicking somebody out of Congress for adultery, because if you were going to do that, you'd pretty much empty out the building. That's just the reality of political life out there. Okay. Apparently, NBC News has had to correct yet another fake story about Donald Trump. Boy, what has actually happened? Apparently, Dave Chappelle is in trouble with his latest Netflix comedy special. Dave Chappelle, he does tell the truth. We will grant him that, but it does get him in trouble. Earlier, we were talking about the Chinese student who wanted to bring in a bulletproof vest to the U.S. and customs wouldn't let him into the country, and how upset they were. And I was saying, bulletproof backpacks are being sold for kids. But apparently, according to this story, the bulletproof backpacks are failing the tests. They're really not as bulletproof as the advertising says. Well, again, in this day and age in the United States, hardly anything is what the advertising says it is. But if you're talking about spending the kind of money it takes to buy bulletproof anything, and by the way, you need to keep in mind that Kevlar does not have an infinite lifespan. It's good for maybe at most 5 years, and after that, it's got to be replaced. But you're buying a bulletproof backpack because you think it's going to keep your kid safe. And I'm sure from the manufacturer's point of view, they're thinking, this thing's never going to get shot at anyway. It's, It's dishonest here. Okay. Apparently, the FBI is raiding the homes of the United Auto Workers Union bosses, part of a corruption probe. And I would say this is probably tangled in with some of this business about where auto plants are going to be built. Part of this whole tariff deal. Okay, here's another case of a story that got out there before it should. Trump administration ending automatic citizenship for U.S. troops' children born abroad. And everybody just went, horror of horrors, how could you do that? And again, it turned out this was another bogus story that just got out there. It's almost like corporate media is out there saying, if it makes Trump look bad, go with it. Don't bother fact-checking it. Just get it on out there. And if we have to apologize, we'll do it in a little, it's kind of a meek little voice here coming back from commercial. That's not news. That's propaganda. Apparently, up in British Columbia, they're going to require parents to vaccinate their children despite the history of adverse effects. And apparently, parents will be required to submit their children's vaccination records if attending a public school. And people are concerned because some of these vaccines do have adverse effects. One of the big problems we have with our current medical industrial complex is this one-size-fits-all approach to medication, whether it's vaccines or cures or psychiatric medication. But we're all different biochemically, and the medicines are going to affect us differently. That's why at the end of a pharmaceutical commercial on TV, you're going to hear this voice saying, well, if you take our medication, it might do this, and it might do that, and it might lead to this, and because they understand everybody is slightly different. But by golly, when we get that assembly line up there for that vaccine, we're just going to shoot that stuff into everybody's arm because it's making money, and the pharmaceutical companies are great supporters of campaigns, apparently up in Canada, as they are down here. Well, we mentioned this the other day. Apparently, Costco opened their first store in China, and they literally got shut down by the police because the crowds just got so out of control. Seems very un-Chinese, I think. Okay, Hurricane Dorian is intensifying as it heads toward the Florida coast. All righty. Apparently, Eric Trump is going to sue MSNBC over the Lawrence O'Donnell report. I think he should. And I hope that he wins. because somebody's got to make an example and get the corporate media back to serving the public interest and not just corporations and politicians here. Okay. More renewed push for term limits. I think members of Congress should have just 2 terms, 4 to 6 years, followed by 10 to 20. So Eric Trump is going to sue here. Don't you just love this kind of stories? Apparently, this man in Maryland, Leon Houghton, resident of Bowie, Maryland, spent nearly 3 months in jail when airport customs officials mistook his bottles of honey from Jamaica as liquid meth. They didn't bother testing it. They just said, oh, that's liquid meth. You're going to jail. 82 days in jail. Still have not apologized. Man, that Jamaican honey, God, watch out for that. Anyway. Let's see. Apparently, President Trump's personal attorney, Charles Harder, has now fired off a letter to NBC Universal warning that a defamation suit will be forthcoming if NBC Universal did not offer a retraction and apology for Lawrence O'Donnell's story that Russian oligarchs co-signed loans to Trump. Lawrence just stepped in it. He got hoaxed by a 4chan user. He just stepped in it. All righty. You know, it's interesting. Fox News was commenting on this earlier, where the New York Times has once again made changes to the online version of an article when leftist critics felt they needed to add more spin. In this case, adding racist references. Oh, no, there's not enough racism in this story. And the New York Times said, yeah, okay. Well, okay, then fire the editorial staff of the New York Times and let the leftists, you know, work in the copy room. That's basically what they're allowing to happen. Is they're letting the newspaper being written by the public. Well, hey, that's what the internet used to be for. It's amazing here. All righty. Apparently, distracted driver cameras are the new rage, where they're going to be peeking through your windshield and making sure that your eyes are firmly on the road. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Ken in New York. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wanted to mention something about what you were just talking about as far as pharmaceutical goes. There's another little passage that I've found in most medications, even insulin, where there's like a statement. It says something to the effect, the exact mechanism by which this occurs is unknown. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have. I've gotten into, reading a lot of package inserts over the last... ever since I had my pneumonia. But yeah, they're putting out products that they don't actually know how they work. They just have a body of evidence that says, you know, when we shoot this chemical into this person, sometimes they feel a little better. And that's what they go to market. And it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference between the traveling Wild West medicine show salesman and the modern pharmacist. They're both out there just pushing these products of dubious efficacy, of possible, harm, and it's all for the money.
If I could add something to it, during the 1990s, the mid-90s, I worked at a place that was engaged in making equipment for the Human Genome Project, for one thing.
Okay.
That's what I was working in, high-voltage power supplies. And the other thing that other people were working on were something called drug discovery. And what they ended up doing is they always had, one company was always trying to make a bigger centrifuge than another. And near the end of the, say, the 1999 in that area, they were starting to come out with centrifuges that could hold up to 300 test tubes. And I said, what does it take that many, smart rear end that I am? How many different mixtures do you have to make before you get lucky?
Yeah. Sort of like a giant roulette wheel. Let's see if we've got something. And
it actually looks like, yes. All right, that's all I have. Good night.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot, Ken. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Still keeping an eye on Dorian, which that last report is strengthening. And again, if you are anywhere along that Florida coast, please take this one seriously. And get inland, get your supplies, and, you're already under a state of emergency. All righty, getting on back to the news here. Let's see. Okay, we talked about this before, but this is a different story in the same thing. The FBI crime lab is examining 2 cameras from the area outside Jeffrey Epstein's cell, which reportedly malfunctioned the night that he died. And the 2 cameras would have had a view into the Manhattan jail cell where Epstein died. Now, 1 camera malfunctioning on that critical night, maybe. 2 cameras, the 2 cameras that had a view into his cell, malfunctioning on that night. You don't have to be Fellini to figure this one out. Oh. Everybody's out there on gun control all over again. Apparently, a lot of gun owners are feeling that the GOP support is kind of, soft. And that the GOP is starting to switch over to the left regarding gun rights. That's kind of a scary situation here. So, more self-defense gun stories. Apparently over at Yale University, there's a professor out there insisting that the Darwinian theory of evolution cannot explain the origin of species, even though that was the name of the book. And every once in a while, we'll see this where somebody will come on out and say, no, Darwin's theory of evolution shows how species change, but there had to be a God, or they had to be, intelligent design. And folks, all it takes is that first self-replicating molecule. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Actually, no, we're going to wait until after the commercial break on this one here. And meanwhile, apparently it has now become an open secret that these fake pictures of the burning Amazon that celebrities are waving around to scream about global warming are 30 years old, and that the actual fires in the Amazon are not that big a deal. All right, we're going to take a break here for commercial. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right to the phones here to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. It's just what you were saying about now with Epstein and the quote and unquote unworking cameras. Okay. Now let me tell you something. If these cameras weren't working, okay, this is a very high-profile inmate, maybe the most high-profile in the country, maybe in the world at the time.
Yeah.
The ship's commander, which would probably, I would say, I'm not sure how it works in federal prison, but it would probably be a captain or a lieutenant, would have been completely aware that that camera was not working and would have assigned officers to watch this guy 24/7, especially since it was night. They would have been at his cell watching him. And he would have been making very well sure that these guys didn't fall asleep either. He'd have put his best officers on it, that most reliable officers, and he would have still made sure that was the case. And he would have gotten those directions directly from the warden.
Yeah,
Okay?
Epstein was under suicide. Epstein was under suicide watch, which is where you have two officers watching him 24 hours a day. But Epstein's own lawyers requested that he be taken off suicide watch. And that's another clue to me that this whole, suicide thing was a fake, a hoax.
Exactly. But he still was in administrative segregation area of the prison. That means, I believe that's pretty universal in corrections. That means every 30 minutes he was to be monitored. Okay, and in a case like Epstein, like I said, a very high-profile inmate, they would have been watching him a lot closer than that if they wanted to keep him alive. Look, I'll give you an example. Look at Harvey, the other Weinstein, right? Now he's on bail.
Yes.
But every time, if you notice, every time he goes to court, now that's state court, New York State. They protect it. I mean, he's got officers all over the place protecting him. Okay, I mean they're filling the halls, just about filling the courtroom and everything else. Watching. If the state or the federal government or any other portion of the government wants to keep somebody alive, they'll keep them alive. Okay, this is all a bunch of garbage. I believe, like you said, he either was murdered, one, or he might have been smuggled out of the prison. Maybe he may be in Tel Aviv right now. Okay, maybe.
I think the latter. I think the latter, because if he was murdered, a man like that is going to have dead man switches that would be released and burn some of the top names. So, in point of fact, I think he's still alive.
I have my opinion about 50-50. I'm not really sure. I certainly think it's a very good possibility. He worked for the Mossad. The Mossad usually like to protect their own people. Okay.
Yes.
It's not that they'll rub like they rubbed out his father or something like that. I'm not so sure about that. As long as he cooperated with them, I get the feeling that they would have done everything they can to protect, to bring him back to Israel. And they've got their stooges there in the U.S. government, the CIA, the FBI, the Justice Department, with Barr. Barr, I believe, is nothing but he's a cleanup man for the. They call it the deep state. I call it the empire, the evil empire that's actually hijacked the country. Okay, that's what Barr is. He's a cleanup man. He wanted to keep Epstein alive. He'd be alive. El Chapo, there's another one. El Chapo was well protected, including going on his way to court, going to court. I mean, he had U.S. Marshals, federal protective officers, you name it, watching him. Okay, they, and in prison he was well watched. He was well protected also. It's a very high security prison. They get a lot of high profile type inmates at the MCC, and nothing happens. Okay, now here with Epstein first, a so-called suicide attempt, and then next thing you know, a couple of weeks later, the man's supposedly dead. I mean, come on, man. The thing, they're taking us for stupid. The government is taking us for stupid. They got to understand, American people aren't that dumb. We are not going to let this happen. We're not going to keep on letting this happen. Okay? What they did, you see how they're manipulating the election now, what they did to Tulsi.
Yes.
They're doing everything they can now to put out all the stops to protect themselves. But we, the people, got to be vigilant. We really do. We've got to understand what these people are about. Now, what they're going to do with these two officers that supposedly fell asleep, they're going to make examples of and blame the whole thing on them. Okay?
Yeah.
Nonsense. This was the empire protecting itself, protecting its interests, protecting its connections to Israel, because imagine if it came out that Israel was conducting a blackmail operation and people really found out about it. There's no way to be able to continue to send all our so many weapons and money and everything else to Israel, and even get to the point where if Israel starts a war with Iran, U.S. might very well be involved. We shouldn't be, but nothing would surprise me. People found that out, that there was the truth about this was a blackmail operation by the Mossad. All bets would be off. There was too much at stake. The empire had to act, and they acted. And that's, they either killed him or they smuggled him out to another country, most likely Israel.
I think he got smuggled out, and the reason I think that, again, goes back to those dead man switches, because I'm sure that through his lawyers, Epstein just put out the word. You know, I have got copies of all the videotapes of all of you having sex with underage kids, and you know, if anything happens to me, they'll be immediately flooded onto the internet, and there'll be no getting it all back. The only way that you're going to be rid of me, so that I don't testify in court about what's been going on in my house, is you have to get me out of this prison. It was a prison break, plain and simple. And a lot of people were involved with it. And the idea that, you know, they're saying the FBI is studying why these cameras may have malfunction. Yeah, look for a cut wire or look for some software changes to the thing. But those, for both cameras that had a view into that cell, to have failed at the same time, I'm sorry, that is just beyond the realm of possibility.
No, and if they did, like I said, the shift commander would have been on it immediately. Okay, you don't have a high profile inmate like that in there and just let something like that happen. Okay, like you said, it's either a prison break or he was murdered. I'm 50-50 on it. Either way, the empire got what it wanted. Israel Mossad got what it wanted, and the people who are, I believe, I'd say about 50% of the Congress are probably pedophiles, maybe been blackmailed by him. And I'd say probably the entire royal family, which isn't hard, since the royal family is known to be a bunch of pedophiles. And going back to at the time of, what's the guy's name? Ivan the Terrible, who evidently is related to the British royal family in some way, you know?
Yeah.
So nothing was surprising, Mike. It really doesn't. You know, like I said, it's just a shame. We need to do something in this country. We need to take this country back, make it a constitutional republic again, end the empire, take the money away from the military-industrial complex, stop supporting this murderous little country in the Middle East. Okay, it's nothing but trouble for us, and take care of this country and the people in this country. All right, Mike. That's all I got to say. You, by the way,
thanks enough.
Right, buddy?
Yeah, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Over in Illinois, apparently they just passed a bill that limits warrantless location tracking. And basically, the governor, J.B. Pritzak, signed this bill that expands a state law barring warrantless location tracking to include historical location data. And it's basically privacy protection for the people of Illinois. And of course, the federal surveillance state is out there screaming, no, 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 no. We have to have access to that information. You know, these people from Illinois, they could all be terrorists. They could all be ISIS. After all, ISIS and Illinois begin with I, and therefore we need all of this data. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Rick in South Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Hanging in.
I'm not. Yeah, can you hear me? I'm just.
I hear you.
Good. I wanted to make a comment about Epstein. I have a little bit of a different take, very similar to what you're talking about. And, you know, if you look at the fact that he is definitely connected to Mossad, and that
yes.
Perhaps Maxwell's daughter is involved with the Mossad as well, and is probably his handler. They always have a handler, you know, when you're in the Secret Service, right? And so, therefore, you know, after the fiasco where he got caught in Florida, you would have thought that they had years to plan what to do to prevent another scenario where he might get dragged before the courts. So, of course, the best thing is the witness protection program, where people enter it usually by faking death. so that way
Yes.
everybody believes they're dead, and then they can continue their life under a new pseudonym, and then, everything's hunky-dory. Now, I think that the Mossad, you got to understand, they know everybody in America, anybody with influence, particularly on the Democratic side and the Clinton side. And to think for a second that Epstein and the Mossad didn't know that the New York's the Southern District of New York's Justice Department was after them would be really foolish. So of course they knew that, and he just didn't happen to fly in there unknowingly and suddenly get nabbed. I don't buy that for a second. I think that this was all planned, and they had to stage his death. And so they set it up so that he would, supposedly be nabbed, supposedly get, incarcerated there in New York, and then miraculously, commit suicide. That was their plan all along. So I don't believe he was ever in New York. I believe it was a double to make it look like him. And then all they had to do was stage the suicide. And to do that, they had to knock out the cameras because it was fake. So if it wasn't fake, the cameras would.
Yeah, let me cut in here a little bit here because I always favor Occam's razor. Given multiple theories, the simplest one tends to be true. And the problem I have with your theory is why go through the trouble of setting up a phony arrest at the airport and all this negative publicity that's going to draw attention to what's going on, as opposed to if you want Epstein to be conveniently dead so he can go into witness protection, fake a car accident or something. There are much easier ways to do it that don't attract attention. The way Epstein was arrested at the airport and the salaciousness of the charges attracted way too much attention. And I think the Southern District of New York, the prosecutor, was legitimately doing his job and just managed to keep this all secret until the arrest was actually made. That's the simplest and best explanation.
Well, I would just sort of counter that by saying this. Okay, what if, say, the White Hats were involved with this, right? So what if they had, say, worked out a deal where they said, okay, we're going to bring down a lot of these pedophiles. Well, what if, because that's what they set out to begin with, to get dirt on people and then use it for blackmail. But what if they decided to, say, come clean, and then they said, okay, we're going to bring down these pedophiles. So what we'll do is we'll stage his arrest and everybody. We'll keep the heat on all the people who are going to be convicted in the future, and we'll try and make them trigger, some maybe attempted murder of him in jail, so they can put the heat on them on purpose for several weeks. And so if they would have done that this way, the high publicity, everybody who's guilty, there's probably hundreds of them, the elite in Hollywood and a lot of politicians in D.C. and all over the place, and, all kinds of people. And so this would have put the fear of God in them, and then they would force them to make mistakes. And so what they would do is be watching all these people that they have on this black book, that he's got, and they would watch them to look to see if they would make mistakes. And say, for instance, they noticed that there was $20 million being transferred out of the Clinton fund. And so perhaps if it's a white hat scenario, I could see that happening. They would want to have a very high public, and if he's in the witness protection program for the white hat, I would say, that would make sense to make it a very high publicity stunt. Now, if it's the black hats doing it, I would agree with you. Then I would say, a plane crash or a car accident out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one here because, again, I think the simplest explanation is going to be the correct one. I know it's fun to start with a theory and embellish and add detail and say, well, maybe we could have this as well, and this was happening over here. Well, this was, no, KISS, K-I-S-S, keep it simple. stupid, and Occam's razor. And that's really the way to go. I think Epstein simply let it be known that if he went to trial, he would name names, and that he wanted to be sprung, and that he had dead man switches all set to go if anything did happen to him in that prison cell. And I think basically Mossad, CIA, FBI, New York police, a lot of people got involved. A lot of people got very rich here. What's really going to be interesting is looking at the people who were involved in the Epstein case and see who gets promoted in the near future. Because if you remember during the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the officer who was in charge of Dallas PD security for John F. Kennedy eventually became chief of police of Dallas. And the man accused of allowing, what's his name, Jack Ruby into the basement of the police station to shoot Lee Oswald was eventually promoted to chief of police of Midlothian, Texas. So we're going to be looking at that situation.
Edgar Hoover.
Okay, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for our last commercial break. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program on this, my 67th birthday. We're still keeping an eye on Hurricane Dorian. It's in that large stretch of open water. There's no land mass in there to try and take strength away from it. There's a lot of heat in that water from which it is going to build up. And all we can do is just basically sit back and watch what happens. But again, if you are in my radio audience and you are along that Florida coast, well, first of all, turn off the radio and get out of there. Get inland, get to high ground, get your emergency supplies together. Do not take this for granted. This is going to be a bad one here. And they're already saying it's expected that as soon as it does hit the Florida Panhandle, the hurricane will lose strength but slow down, which means it's going to dump a huge amount of rain, leading to more flooding. And as of the last report, the center of the predicted storm track has shifted now somewhat south. And so I hope they're getting everything battened down there at the Kennedy Launch Center, because I know that vehicle assembly building was built to withstand a hurricane, but I don't think it's Cat 4. So we'll see what happens there. All righty. Now, we're all used to our credit scores. You can see TV commercials where you can sign up for credit reporting scores and find out how good your credit is. But apparently there is a new one, and it's similar to China's social credit system. And this article over an activist post is talking about how Americans are unable to transact business, not because they have a bad credit score, but because their security score. Apparently, there are now companies out here in the United States that are rating us all for security. And apparently, there's this one lady went to a Western Union outlet in Maryland to send $100 to a friend abroad. Western Union refused and said that she needed to provide validation of the source of income, the purpose of sending or receiving the funds, and the relationship to the counterparty. And apparently there was a long correspondence ensued. Western Union kept referring to the USA Patriot Act and to a private policy. And when asked to explain the private policy, Western Union said, it's private, and we don't have to explain. We cannot provide specific details about why your transaction was declined for legal and proprietary reasons. In other words, they can simply say, we refuse to do business with you, and we don't have to tell you why. Well, I know why you're refusing to do business with me, because I'm a gay transgender pole vaulter, and I'm going to sue. I mean, this really is just insane. All right, there's the music. Time for me and Claire to get on out of here. and get some stuff done this afternoon here. This is our next to last day here on the island of Oahu. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. They really need it. And we'll be back tomorrow, Friday. So aloha, America.